Hi, my name is Matt DeFrank. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a sex educator. I run the account Trans Fat Sex Ed, where I like to post work from other fat and genderqueer artists, as well as share information from sex workers and other people within the LGBTQ community, while also informing my followers about new information. I talk things about like gender affirming sex. I also talk about my own experiences with fatness. And this is really where I wanted to start building a community. So for this video, I want to talk about the intersections of fatness and transness, and I'm really going to ground that in my own experiences, which I am going to say are very white and upper middle class. I grew up in Southern California in the US. So to start that off, I was a fat kid from like second grade onward, never been not considered fat by people, was made fun of a lot, teased, told how disgusting I was. I had a lot of commentary from family about food sometimes. Luckily, I had parents that were pretty understanding, although we didn't really have like normalized eating, so food was kind of a weird conversation for everybody. I did see, like growing up, I feel like the thing that really has impacted my idea of the intersection like of fatness and transness has been how often I was mocked as being like manly and masculine as a fat person when I wanted to be viewed as a woman or a girl at the time when I was a child. And I was constantly told that I was so manly and so big, and I felt like really ashamed about that. And the way I dealt with that was by grasping onto hyperfemininity, of wanting to really like fit in and be the girl that people want to be with and be nice. But of course, like I'm also someone who doesn't really go with the flow. So I guess I wasn't like that kind of normal. But anyways, because I was also very gay all the time. But so as I grew closer to understanding my gender and presenting more masculine, I found that the thing that people were really attached to that would gender me the most in public situations was my chest, and my chest being larger is so related to how my body is fat. So suddenly I've become more feminized, and people feminize me in social situations, although I present very masculine and really lean into my queer masculine identity and being a butch. So I have just found it interesting because then as I've gone into support groups as a trans person, I found that so much conversations in the trans masculine community and the mostly trans masculine community, support groups kind of like go between these things. They're, Facebook trans support groups. So I joined these groups and people were really focused on sharing exercise routine, diet routines, getting as thin as possible. How can we get washboard abs? How can you lessen your chest? How can you build up your shoulders? How can you be a man through your body? And it really started making me get obsessed with what I was eating. It started making me focus on like being seen as strong and how that was tied to my gender. And I started feeling really uncomfortable with that. And I realized I was getting lost yet again with this chasing of like that thinness was going to validate me and my identity and who I was. And as I delved deeper into that, I began to be kind of angry. It's like all my life I wanted to be like when I wanted to not be seen as masculine, I was totally viewed as masculine. My fatness was weaponized against me in that way. I was told that I could never be seen as who I was, that I was disgusting, repulsive, people wouldn't want to be with me, and all of those fun things. Then when I'm fat and want to be seen as masculine, these feminine things are now my curves in my body, my rolls, my breast, how soft my body is. And it's just really interesting because I see also this in like mixed trans online support groups that include like trans femme, trans masculine, and like everybody on the gender spectrum, where there's a lot of conversations about losing weight in order to pass. I see trans feminine people being really pushed into the idea that thinness is womanhood. It's how that you can be seen. It's how people are valuing them and really objectifying trans women and trans femmes. And so I felt it's important to talk about how fatness is really this obscure thing that people just want to make into a weapon whenever they can. And it doesn't have anything to do with really what your fatness is doing to your body, but also how people want to harm you. And it's not that everybody wants to harm you who's being fat phobic intentionally, but it's that there's this larger system of fat phobia, and there's many different sources that benefit from it. There's so many organizations that benefit from self-hatred, Weight Watchers, going like TV shows like My 600 Pound Life. All these things are Biggest Loser, which is a horrible thing. And so all these things really like flux on this, how many weight loss programs, how many diets, Special K. I mean, I remember when I was like 10 years old and eating Special K fucking cereal, literally cereal with dried strawberries in it, thinking that like this was going to give me the body that people would actually respect, that would mean that I would be worthy of touch, of intimacy, and of a relationship. And I came to a conclusion really like in the last 6 years, that I've just decided that I am okay with being fat, and that I'm not going to allow these other entities to tell me that my fatness is wrong. Of course, I still have to deal with the structural aspect of fat phobia, which is largely impacted my experience within the medical field, finding top surgeons who don't base everything on my BMI, which is a totally useless system, but that is a whole other story about how the insurance companies like to jump in on that. So yeah, and I think it's really important to include this within conversations with trans people, because so often we are talking about our bodies in this way of transitioning, of changing, of not being okay in where we are. But let's not confuse that with fat phobia. Let's not confuse that with that we need to be losing weight, we need to be thinner. These are things that are false. You are not more masculine because you are fat. You are not more feminine because you are fat, because fatness has nothing to do with gender. And the reality is that we can exist in all these different ways and not have to form into the ways that people want to see us. And so I think it's really, this is extremely vital for us to get with the high amount of eating disorders within the trans and non-binary community. And I find it to be something that I found a lot of empty space in. I saw some accounts that were run by trans people, fat trans people, showing a lot of their bodies. Honestly, a lot of cool artists are on Instagram who are trans, fat, and queer. And I could just share that and talk about that nonstop, honestly. But I was really finding a lack of that within sex education in the sexuality field. A lot of conversation around eating disorders were also conversations led by people who are thin. A lot of conversations about body positivity are by people who are thin. And I want to really emphasize that there's a distinction between thinness and fatness. And that is also invisible and pointless, but at the same time, it is something that does impact the livelihood, especially of fat people. So when we're talking about body positivity versus fat positivity, it's really important to realize the distinction of including fatness as the first word. I think that's what makes people the most scared about fat positivity, but I think that's the most important, valid and part of that. So the difference between the fat positivity movement and the body positivity movement is that, one, fat positivity centers fatness. It centers fat people. Now, we can go on and on about how the categorization of thinness and fatness is just nothing, because people think that they're the fat friend and they're a size 8 or whatever their size is, and then they go to another place and they're the skinny friend. So really it's all relative to the spaces that you're in and the ways that the expectations that are held about you, and a lot of that can also be cultural, it can be racial. I mean, anti-fatness or fat phobia is really rooted in racism when we really get down to that, but that's a much deeper conversation for another video. But so body positivity was something that started a little bit around with fat positivity, but it was a way to make it more marketable, really. And so many people use this term body positivity to include the idea of thin shaming, which is very real, that people get told that their body is way too thin, you gotta go eat a hamburger, which is very inappropriate, and really no one should be commenting on each other's body weight, in my opinion, anywhere at any time, unless it's necessary, medically necessary. But necessary is like that's a whole other thing too, because a lot of times medical professionals want to include weight and things that they don't need in order just to perpetuate the idea that being fat means that you are automatically unhealthy, means that you are automatically not put in the category, not able to really get over or be healthy in any way. So like you can go in with your ankle hurting and you're still going to be told you need to lose weight, even if it has nothing to do with your ankle. And I know people are going to argue with me about the ankle because the weight of your ankle and when you're standing and things like that. But really, there's a lot of things that we're told about fatness that is not true. And maybe that could be true with your ankle. But I mean, I've gone in to a psychiatrist appointment talking about my PTSD and my depression and been told I need to lose weight, which really only would increase my anxiety and depression. So I don't know how that was helping. And I find a lot of fat people have those exact same experiences. And I'm sure many of you have had that maybe. And so back to the idea of like thinness and fatness and the real separation and distinction that we do need to acknowledge is that fat people are treated differently. So you may be the fat friend in your friend group. You might be the fat friend in your family, the fat person in your family. But the reality is that the question is, do you experience structural oppression as a fat person? And so many people don't understand that being fat has nothing to do with what the individual people are talking to you about in your life. It has to do with how society has categorized us. And what that impacts is our ability to get jobs, our ability to be respected by individuals and be heard and be seen as worthy, and our ability to be told that we could even love ourselves or want to be with ourselves. Even just laying in bed, not even like loving yourself, like I've got to say every day that my body is perfect, because we're just never going to reach that. It's a standard that is way too high for anybody to encompass. I mean, there are many days that I get fat phobia things just running in my head telling me that I am eating too much, or that no one's going to want to be with me, or that I'm really gross, or that I'm doing something wrong. And these are all things that are outside things. This isn't me, you know? As much as it's playing in my head, it's what is coming from the commercials I see, the films I see, and just media in general. It's also coming from the fact that most people going to work, even though people aren't really going to work during this pandemic, but most people who are going to work have to go and talk to people about their keto diet, paleo diet, and it's very okay for people to really openly self-hate themselves for even gaining 5 pounds, which really doesn't remarkably change your health. And so those conversations are things that reinforce to me daily as a fat person, and other fat people as well, that our bodies are not, make it so that we, and our fatness particularly, not just our bodies, our fatness makes it so that we are not able to access the same things as thin people, that we are not worthy to access happiness. We aren't worthy to access sexiness, hotness, cuteness, all those different things, handsomeness. But the reality is that those things are all ours too. They aren't just for thin people. And the reality is that you can be fat. You are fat and all of those things. Or I am fat and all those things. Or I don't know if you're fat, but maybe you are. But back to the body positivity movement is that so many people are using this, particularly thin people, as a way to market themselves as radical, as to say that they're more accepting of various body image and that body diversity. And that's really great. And honestly, that can encompass so many things. I mean, people with diverse body shapes, people with disabilities, people who, it just can encompass a lot of things. While fat positivity, while that sounds really great, the reality is of like how people are using body positivity is mostly by doing things like taking pictures of themselves as thin people, sitting down and bending over and showing you the 3 rolls. You know, I love those pictures. Just kidding. And the reason why those pictures make me upset is because you are not taking pictures and bending yourself and saying like, here's my rolls and I love them anyways. As a fat person seeing that, who stands up with rolls every day, what I'm registering is that you had to work you're saying that it's so hard for anybody to love themselves, even with the tiniest bit of fat. And it just tells me again, is like another image for me to see of thin people. another image of me to see of thin people who hate themselves because they are just even a little bit, have a little bit of the type of fatness I have. And I think it's important to say that fat positivity is not that. Fat positivity is saying fatness does not need to be a weapon. It can be just a part of your body. It could be a part of your identity, but it is something that is structural. It is the fact that I cannot go and get medical care without my body weight being involved. It is the fact that doctors ignore my pain and I'm less likely to get hired. It is the fact that I cannot find clothing in clothing stores that fit me. And that's not because my hips are wide. That's not because I just happen to have a different type of curve within my hourglass figure. That is because I am told and reinforced by these clothing companies, by all these places, that my body is not worthy. I'm not even allowed to have clothing unless I'm paying more money online. You don't even get it. I rarely am able to try on clothing in my own size. Like, that is a luxury, to walk into a clothing store and have things in my size to actually hold. And I'm bringing this all up about this distinction is because I've been seeing people trying to co-opt the fat positivity movement when they are not fat. And the reality is that you can take anything you want and say, okay, you can be fat in this space. You can be considered, like I said, a fat person with your friends, the fat person in your family. But it is different to be fat. It is different when fatness includes structural oppression. It is different. If you are not being affected in that way, then you are not able to understand the fat experience. Because just feeling ashamed of your body is not the same, and is not as, like, that is not the same or equivalent to the violence of fat phobia. There's no way to think that you disliking the 5 pounds on your body is the same as me not getting medical care that is appropriate and could keep in life sustaining because of my fatness, with no other correlation or tie to that. And I say all of this to go back to gender, because I also think that so much of body positivity gets really wrapped up in femininity. And I found myself having a really hard time connecting to the fact that everything was highly gendered. Most things with body positivity are only about women, and really focus on the idea of how women are harmed about fatness. And what this again does is really takes the centering off of this structural oppression of fat phobia, and goes into this weird gender spiral, when in reality everybody of any gender who is fat is experiencing fat phobia, and they deserve a space to talk about that. They deserve a space to feel safe. They deserve images of their body that are great. We do not need to have a separation and distinction that body positivity I don't even like body positivity, or that loving your body is something that is tied to being feminine or any other type of gender construction. Really, everybody should be talking about the deconstruction and where fat phobia really falls in our lives. And so I think that I want to really provide a space for people to have more conversation. Oh, is that my belly out? To have more conversations about what it means to be fat, and to be more open about that identity, and more people who are not experiencing fat phobia structurally to really kind of, not to be cliche, but take a seat, I have been experiencing a hard time of finding representation of masculine people talking about their bodies and talking about the importance of not hating yourself and wishing and going on and on about improving yourself. I'm tired of going on to trans support groups, being a part of reading trans books, talking to trans people, and having them be so based on the idea that their fatness genders them or that their fatness makes them unworthy. And I think that we all have a piece in that. So whether you're fat, whether you're trans, whether you're both, whether you're neither, you still have a piece of working to disassemble the structural of fat phobia. And that means interrupting the small conversations we have. That does mean being uncomfortable. That means that being the person that when everybody in your office is sitting in the little kitchenette talking about paleo diet, you say, hey, diets aren't really cool and could be triggering for some people, so maybe we should just stop this. And everybody looks at you, or it goes silent, and now you're like the weird one who stops the conversation. Yeah, those moments can change things in a much larger sense. We have to be willing to talk about it. We have to be willing to say it and to name it. And I think for so long, fat phobia hasn't been named, and people haven't, and the not naming of that has made it so that there is no, it feels like as a fat person, there's no space to talk about your experience. And fat people really experience a lot of mental health struggles because of that. And really what affects fat people's health the most is not their fatness, but the fat phobia they experience. So I just really want to implore that everybody can have a role in like deconstructing those things, and that, I don't know, I mean, you don't have to be as intense as me. You can be a little bit more like, I don't know, hey, let's not talk about that fat stuff. That's kind of mean. Or like, oh, that show I'm watching right now is fat phobic. So often just like bringing those things up to my friends even who are thin makes them realize how much they are engaging with fat phobia. I mean, even thinking about like thin people not shopping at stores that are not size inclusive. How much would that change fat people's lives if there is actually like more people refusing to be buying clothes from places where fat people aren't able to access anything? And don't give me that it's more expensive to make fat clothes. That makes no sense. Everybody deserves to be clothed if they want to be clothed. And so I just want to say that we all have a part of it, and I really have so much more to say about like fatness and transness. So this is my first video, but thank you for watching, and I hope to talk to you soon.